I'm breaking down everything happening in The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, Season 7, Episode 9, Up in Smoke. And this is one of the more layered episodes this season has delivered so far. Let me walk you through exactly what I'm seeing in this episode of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, Season 7, Episode 9, Up in Smoke. The episode opens with the research team locked in on Homestead 2, and their objective is clear. They're using smoke to try to smoke out answers about this location. I want to be precise about what that actually means, because smoke testing isn't just a visual gimmick for the cameras. It's a real investigative method. By introducing smoke into a space, I can reveal airflow pattern, hidden opening, drafts, and pressure differentials that aren't visible under normal conditions. If Homestead 2 has some kind of concealed passage or unusual air movement tied to whatever anomaly the team suspects is present there, smoke is one of the clearest, lowest tech ways to expose it in real time. So that's where I'm starting in this breakdown of Season 7, Episode 9, Up in Smoke, a focused, deliberate operation at Homestead 2. Before I get into the twist that defines this episode, I want to spend some real time on why Homestead 2 has become such a point of interest for this team in the first place. Throughout Season 7, I've watched this location get more and more attention. It's not the triangle, it's not the mesa, it's a distinct area with its own history of strange readings and unexplained behavior. When a research team this experienced decides to commit an entire operation to smoke testing a single homestead, that tells me they believe there's something physical there worth exposing, something structural or environmental that regular sensors haven't been able to fully capture on their own. I think it's worth explaining smoke testing in a bit more depth here, because I want viewers to understand exactly why this method was chosen over something more high-tech. Smoke reacts to air currents in a way that's immediate and visible. If there's a draft coming from somewhere unexpected, a gap in a wall, a shift in pressure caused by an underground void, or any kind of airflow anomaly, smoke will show it instantly in a way cameras and thermal imaging sometimes miss. It's a deceptively simple technique, but on a show that's used ground-penetrating radar, seismic sensors, and advanced drones, there's something almost refreshing about watching the team go back to basics with a method this direct. I want to emphasize that this isn't a lesser approach, it's a complementary one, and it fits into the bigger toolkit this team has built up over 7 seasons of investigation. I also want to spend a moment on why Homestead 2 specifically, as opposed to any other structure on the property, became the focus of this particular test. Structures on this ranch tend to earn attention through a combination of documented history and recent sensor activity. If Homestead 2 has shown any kind of irregular reading in prior episodes, whether that's unexplained temperature fluctuations, equipment malfunctions, or reports of strange sounds or sensations from people spending time there, that history builds a case strong enough to justify committing an entire operation to it. I think it's safe to assume this location didn't get chosen at random. There's almost certainly a documented reason built up over multiple episodes or even multiple seasons that led the team to believe smoke testing here specifically was worth the time and resources. Now, in Season 7, Episode 9, Up in Smoke, this operation at Homestead 2 is running exactly as planned, at least at first. And I want to sit with that phrase for a moment, at least at first, because that's the hinge point this entire episode turns on. The team has a plan, they're executing it, and everything appears to be moving in the expected direction. And then, without warning, strange and unexpected anomalies begin appearing in an entirely different area of the ranch. That's the twist driving this entire episode, and it's a significant one. Let me explain why this shift matters so much for the ongoing story of Skinwalker Ranch. This property has never confined its activity to one predictable area. I've tracked anomalies in the triangle, near the mesa, and across multiple homesteads throughout this show's run. And in season 7, episode 9, Up in Smoke, that pattern continues in a very direct way. Just as the team commits real time and resources to Homestead 2, the ranch generates activity somewhere else entirely, somewhere they weren't even monitoring closely. I want to pose the same question I think a lot of viewers will be asking after this episode. Is this a coincidence, or does it point to something deeper, some kind of connection where disturbing one part of the ranch triggers a reaction somewhere else? I'm not going to pretend the episode hands over a definitive answer to that, but I can tell you season 7, episode 9, Up in Smoke, adds another compelling data point to that theory, one that's been floating around this franchise for years, and I want to be clear about why this theory keeps resurfacing season after season. This isn't the first time viewers have noticed a pattern where activity in one location seems to correlate with unexplained developments somewhere else on the property. If there's some kind of underlying network connecting different areas of the ranch, whether that's geological, electromagnetic, or something else entirely, an episode like Up in Smoke is exactly the kind of evidence that keeps that theory alive. Let me break down the Homestead 2 side of this episode in more detail, because it's still a major component of Up in Smoke, even with the surprise development pulling focus elsewhere. The decision to use smoke tells me the team is looking for something specific, most likely tied to airflow, structural quirks, or a hidden feature of the location that hasn't shown up through cameras or standard sensors. If there's a concealed opening or an area where air behaves abnormally due to an underlying anomaly, this method is built to expose it visually and immediately. I also want to think through what kind of result would actually validate this approach. If the smoke moves in a straight, predictable line, that likely rules out any hidden anomaly at that specific point, and the team crosses it off the list. But if the smoke behaves erratically, curling in unexpected directions, disappearing into a gap that shouldn't be there, or reacting to something that isn't accounted for by normal airflow, that's the kind of result that would justify everything this operation was built around. Based on how this franchise typically handles incremental discoveries, I expect whatever the smoke reveals at Homestead 2 to add another piece to the broader picture the team has been building about this location all season. Even without an immediate headline-grabbing reveal, this test likely narrows down the possibilities, ruling certain things out while pointing toward others. That's been the pattern throughout season 7, small, methodical pieces of evidence stacking up toward a bigger picture. Now let me get into the second half of season 7, episode 9, Up in Smoke, because this is where the episode really distinguishes itself. Strange and unexpected anomalies show up in a completely different section of the property. I want to emphasize that word, unexpected. This isn't something the team walked into looking for. This is the ranch doing what it's done best across 7 seasons, catching the very people studying it off guard. I think it's worth sitting with what that says about the scale of what this team is dealing with. This isn't a small, fully mapped property. Skinwalker Ranch is large enough and strange enough that new activity can emerge in places the team hasn't focused on in years. Up in Smoke is a clear reminder of just how much of this location may still be unexplored or under monitored compared to the areas that usually dominate the show's attention. I think this is actually one of the more important takeaways from this episode for the franchise as a whole. 7 seasons in, and the ranch is still capable of producing surprises outside the areas everyone assumes are the most active. That alone should recalibrate how viewers think about the scope of this investigation going forward. From where I'm sitting, this kind of split focus structure produces some of the most memorable episodes in any given season. I'm watching a methodical, planned investigation at Homestead Two, running parallel to a reactive, unpredictable situation unfolding somewhere else entirely. That contrast between control and chaos, between a scheduled experiment and an unscripted event, is exactly what gives Season 7, Episode 9, Up in Smoke, its tension. I want to point out how rare this structure actually is for this show. Most episodes build toward a single, unified objective, even when there are multiple smaller moments along the way. Up in Smoke is unusual in that it genuinely splits its attention between two completely separate developments happening at the same time in two completely different parts of the property. I also want to walk through the real decisions the team faces once this second area starts showing activity. Do they pause the Homestead 2 operation to redirect toward the new anomalies? Do they try to run both investigations at once, splitting personnel and equipment? These choices carry real weight on this show because time, manpower, and access to specialized instruments are limited resources. Whatever direction the team takes in Up in Smoke tells me a lot about how they prioritize a fresh, unexpected development against an already planned investigation. I think this is one of the more underrated aspects of how this show operates behind the scenes, the logistics of running a serious research operation on a property this large with limited daylight, limited equipment, and a limited number of trained personnel. Every choice to redirect attention comes with a cost, and Up in Smoke puts that reality front and center. Let me touch on the title itself, because I think Up in Smoke is doing double duty here. On one level, it's a direct reference to the literal smoke used at Homestead 2. But there's also a common phrase. Something going up in smoke usually means plans falling apart or expectations getting upended. Given that the team's carefully planned Homestead 2 operation gets interrupted by a completely unplanned development elsewhere, that second meaning feels very intentional. I think the title is winking at the idea that even the most carefully designed investigation on this ranch can get derailed in an instant. This franchise has a track record of choosing episode titles that work on more than one level, and I think Up in Smoke is a strong example of that pattern continuing into Season 7. Now, let me talk about what Season 7, Episode 9, Up in Smoke, could mean for the rest of the season. If the anomalies at this new location turn out to be significant, I expect this episode to be remembered as the moment a brand new storyline opened up. This franchise has a track record of using a seemingly minor development as the seed for a much larger arc later in the season. And I think that's exactly what's happening here, even if the full significance isn't spelled out within the episode itself. I want to draw a comparison here to how earlier seasons have handled similar setups, a small, seemingly isolated event introduced almost as a footnote in one episode, only to become a central storyline several episodes later, once the team has had time to properly investigate it. If Up in Smoke is following that same pattern, this new location could end up being one of the more important threads of the back half of Season 7. I also want to flag how this new activity might connect to things the team has already investigated elsewhere on the property. Given how interconnected this show's mysteries have proven to be across previous seasons, I wouldn't be surprised if this new location ties back, directly or indirectly, to patterns already documented in earlier episodes. Whether that connection gets addressed immediately or plays out over future episodes, I'm confident this adds another thread to the increasingly complex picture Season 7 has been building. I think it's worth remembering just how much this show has trained its audience to expect these kinds of connections. Very rarely does a new anomaly exist in total isolation from everything else the team has documented. More often than not, these threads eventually intersect, and Up in Smoke feels like it's setting up exactly that kind of eventual convergence. Let me also point out the human element I'm picking up on in this episode. For the team, I imagine this creates a real mix of frustration, excitement. Frustration because a resource-intensive operation at Homestead 2 gets complicated by something unplanned, and excitement because new, unexpected anomalies are exactly the kind of discovery that drew many of these researchers into this work in the first place. That tension, wanting to finish what's already in motion while also chasing something new, comes through clearly in how this episode is structured. I think this human dynamic is part of what keeps this show grounded, even when the subject matter itself is so strange. These are real people making real decisions under real time pressure, and an episode like Up in Smoke puts that pressure on full display. Comparing this to Rocket Men, the episode right before it in Season 7, I notice a real difference in pacing. Rocket Men built toward one focused high-stakes operation with a singular payoff. Up in Smoke, by contrast, is built on division, one storyline unfolding exactly as planned at Homestead 2, another erupting without warning somewhere else. That structural variety is exactly what keeps a season feeling dynamic rather than repetitive, and after a big singular breakthrough like Rocket Men. I think Season 7, Episode 9, Up in Smoke, offers a completely different kind of tension. I think this kind of pacing variation is actually a deliberate choice by the show's producers, alternating between big, singular breakthrough episodes and more fragmented, multi-thread episodes keeps the season from feeling repetitive, and it mirrors the actual unpredictable rhythm of real investigative work. For anyone trying to track the bigger picture of Season 7, I treat Up in Smoke as an episode worth revisiting later on. Whatever happens at this new location is likely to resurface as the season builds toward its later episodes, especially if it connects to broader patterns already established. Even without a full resolution here, I think that this episode plants questions that carry forward. Why this specific area became active now, what it might reveal about the property as a whole, and how it ties into everything documented so far this season. I also want to spend a moment thinking about how this episode might be discussed in the broader fan community once it airs. Episodes that introduce a new location or a new anomaly tend to generate a specific kind of conversation. Viewers trying to map exactly where on the property this new activity is happening, how it relates to known landmarks like the triangle or the mesa, and whether it lines up with any previously reported sightings from the ranch's long documented history. I expect Season 7, Episode 9, Up in Smoke, to generate exactly that kind of discussion, especially among viewers who like to track the physical geography of the ranch across seasons. I also want to think about how this episode's two storylines might ultimately be framed once the season is looked at as a whole. It's entirely possible that Up in Smoke ends up functioning as a hinge point in season 7, the moment where the show's attention formally begins shifting away from areas it has focused on for years and towards something new. If that's the case, I expect future episodes to reference this episode directly, treating the discovery of this new anomaly zone as the origin point of a storyline that carries all the way through to the season finale. That's a pattern this franchise has used before, planting a seed early and letting it grow across several episodes before paying it off in a major way. To summarize where season 7, episode 9, Up in Smoke lands, the team goes in with a clear plan, using smoke to reveal hidden answers at Homestead 2. But instead of that investigation playing out in isolation, strange and unexpected anomalies emerge in a completely different area of the ranch, pulling focus and raising new questions the team wasn't fully prepared for. Whatever the smoke ultimately reveals at Homestead 2, and whatever this new activity turns out to mean, I can tell you this episode reinforces one of the most consistent truths about Skinwalker Ranch. Just when you think you know where to look, this property finds a way to surprise you somewhere else entirely. Now, I want to hear from you. What was the biggest moment of this episode? And what do you think happens next? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more episode breakdowns and spoilers.